Okay, folks, we are going to get started now. We just want to welcome you first off to the Data Mesh Learning community. Today's panel is towards a practical data mesh roadmap. So let me give you guys a quick introduction. Obviously today, we all know that it's pretty clear that data is the fuel of the modern enterprise. It powers our business decisions, improves operations, creates innovations, and enables outstanding customer outcomes, just to name a few things. Now, as we all know, data mesh is a modern approach that helps us drive towards these outcomes and more effectively and efficiently do it. Now, we're not going to go through this, but data mesh advocates several principles: domain ownership, data as a product, making it data discoverable, understandable, trustworthy, and interoperable, a self-serve platform, and federated governance. Now, as a data mesh community, we know these things. Like I said, we're not going to go into that a lot of detail, but clearly there's a lot of components involved in this. There's obviously some architecture components. There's definitely some organizational change components, and it probably has something to do with identifying your product, data products, identifying the owners, and even some of the sponsors. So all these things are part of your data mesh journey. So the real question is, how do we kickstart this journey? How do we lay out a roadmap for this journey? And that's what today's discussion is actually all about. So today we want to talk about how you can create your enterprise data mesh roadmap. We want to help you figure out where to start. How do I make it grow? And what foundation needs to be in place to allow your enterprise data mesh to flourish? So that's where today's discussion is going to go. Now, we're going to try to provide some insights based on real world experiences from our panel members, each of which is a very experienced data mesh practitioner. And I'd like to allow them to introduce themselves. So why don't we start with Amy? Amy, perhaps just tell us a little bit about what you do for a living and some of your experience with data mesh.
Sure. Well, my name is Amy. I'm a senior data product manager at a Swiss marketplace. I've been working in IT for more than 13, 14 years in software engineering first, and for the last 8 years in data. And basically now I'm trying, with all my background on technical side, trying to bring also all the strategic thinking and helping the organizations to achieve all the digital transformation with this data mesh initiative. And we are quite not new, but we have been on the data mesh journey for around 8 months now. Still a lot of things to do, but yeah, that's all.
Awesome, Amy, we're glad to have you here. Charlotte, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, hi everyone, really happy to be here. So I'm Charlotte. I have about 8 years of experience in various consulting firms in Paris, specialized in data and AI. I've worked a lot on data strategy, data governance subject, and more recently also on data mesh especially for insurance industry, actually in France. Still doing it, and yeah, at the same time starting a startup on a data sharing platform. You can also check this out.
Awesome, Charlotte, we're so glad to have you here. Last but not least, my friend is Jean-Georges Perrin. Tell us about yourself, my friend.
Hey, hi Eric, hi Amy, hi Charlotte, and hi everybody out there. So my name is Jean-Georges Perrin. I go by JGP unless you're Canadian or French. It's much easier. I work at PayPal, where I have implemented data mesh. Well, there's a rumor about that anyway. And I've also been an IBM champion for 15 years. And recently, I published this wonderful little book here, which is now translated in French, German, and later today we're going to announce the Chinese version of data mesh for all ages.
Fantastic, Jean-Georges. As for me, my name's Eric Broda. I'm the president of Broda Group Software. We're a boutique consulting company focused on accelerating financial services firms' enterprise data mesh journey. I've implemented data mesh at large global insurers, done strategies for banks, and built ecosystems for large payment companies. I'm your panel host for today's discussion, so I get to ask most of the questions, I suppose. But very quickly here on an administrative note, each of the panel members here are talking on their own behalf and do not necessarily speak for their employers or clients. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's get right into this. So the obvious, we're here to talk about a data mesh roadmap, but let's start with something really simple. What is a roadmap first and foremost? Jean-Georges, why don't we start with you today?
Okay. Well, I will say that a roadmap is a feuille de route, which makes it a lot more easier when it says in French, right, Charlotte? So basically, it's your plan. Let's not overcomplicate things. It's really, what are you doing first? What are you doing after? And what's kind of your end goal? Okay. Knowing that nowadays in the Agile world, your end goal is flexible. I would say that a roadmap is probably something you try to have for at least a year, okay, to give it a little bit of visibility. It's something you can take to your stakeholders and discuss that and have the big features on your data mesh, having the capabilities and all those things. So that's all I picture.
Perfect.
A roadmap.
Perfect, Jean-Georges. So really, this is a plan and an outcome. So obviously there's some technical components. Amy, perhaps what would typically go into a data mesh, high level data mesh roadmap in terms of some of the technical things that we're going to be talking about today?
Well, there is a lot of things, as you said before, that are part of these components. But something very important is that we have to set up all the IAM roles, all the security, all the data platform part. And of course, if you have different cloud providers or different systems, you need to take that in consideration as well in how you're going to be able to connect all these parts. And that should be part of the beginning of the roadmap to understand how you're going to, scale up and proceed in the future. And that's why data mesh is not an easy implementation, but it will take, not 6 months, not 3 months, but longer journeys, to be able to implement this correctly.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy. So Charlotte, obviously, Amy has a perspective on some of the technical components. We're going to go into that in a lot more detail, but Zamek has called data mesh a socio-technical approach. When we think about the implications for our roadmap, there's obviously technical stuff, but what does this socio part mean? And what are we going to talk about today at a very high level?
Yeah, I think, in the roadmap, we need to add some streams related to organizational aspects and also communication, because it's a tool also that you can use to convince the different stakeholders to show the vision, where you want to go, why you want to do this. This is truly important. And I think maybe another point is the budget aspect. How is this going to impact the different teams? Is going to finance the whole project? This is very important in the organization. So I'd say, the finance part, of course, organization and communication. Communication is key. So to me, it has to be a full stream in the roadmap.
Okay. Perfect. And we're definitely going to be drilling down into the organizational side a little bit. So let's look at this, right from the start. So we have some enterprises. I'm an enterprise architect. I'm maybe even data product owner. Jean-Georges, what is the first thing I do to begin to create that roadmap? Where do I start?
So the way we started is really to analyze requirements. Okay, so that's really, it sounds very basic, but why are we doing that? Okay, why a data mesh and why not something else like a data warehouse or a data lake, okay, or data fabric? Okay, so why are we doing that? And then based on the why, you realize what you're going to build, and then you put that on a time schedule. What do you want before? But I think going back to the thing is, it's always ask yourself why.
Perfect. Now, when we think about the asking the question why, I think that actually sets the overall context for your data mesh journey. So things like a value proposition. How do we gain, once we have that value proposition, how do we gain sponsorship so we can actually begin to get some of our efforts funded? So let's talk a little bit of, just very quickly before we drill down into some of the specific roadmap elements, because this value proposition, I suppose to call it that, is so critical. Charlotte, for you, maybe is there an example that you can give from your industry that of a value proposition that perhaps kickstarted a data mesh journey that you're comfortable sharing?
Yes, sure. I mean, it always depends on the initial context, of course. But so maybe I can share just a quick example. So in the insurance industry, the company that I worked for, there was already a data science team that was doing some projects. It was working, but they received a lot of demands, so it was hard for them to keep up with business demands. Everybody was frustrated. So one of the keys here was to say, okay, we know why we need to go faster in the delivery of these projects. So this was clear. So like this, we were able to define the different KPIs that were the objectives of the transformation. And once you have this, it's easier to get the sponsorship, because it's clear you can transform this value into revenues, into saying, okay, we're gonna save time, thus save money. Actually, it's a bit simple saying like this. You need to be more precise than that, but it's an example that I can share today.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlotte. Amy, for you, you've mentioned earlier in the discussion that your firm is approximately 8 months into their data mesh journey. What kick-started that? What was the value proposition, to the extent that you can share it? What was the impetus for kick-starting your enterprise data mesh journey?
Almost the same thing as Charlotte, just one central data team that cannot keep up with all the work, and then the necessity to have something more stream, where you can actually have people working, for example, on sales, working on leads, working on different topics, marketing, advertising, and kind of divide it and be able to have these sharing data. And also the fact that we have, the company is quite big, so we have different business units. And each business unit, because it was a merger in the past, so they were working with different cloud providers. So how do you harmonize or make these data come together and make it shareable to other people and accessible in an easier way, instead of just I will go to someone and ask for a CSV file and someone else another CSV, and then you just merge it somewhere else, and then you don't get these automated updates, and it's just a mess. So the need is basically that, to have all this data available for everyone in an easier way, because there is a lot of business people who needs that, but it's too complicated. And sometimes there was the cases that no one even know what's the source of certain data. So you cannot even fix a data source or nothing. So you need a little bit more organization, these smaller teams, to be able to, bring value of that data. And also that brings data quality and data ownership and some other topics that the data mesh, bring all together. So that's why it was a decision to bring this framework into the company and try to make it work with one of the small business units first, instead of roll it out fully to the whole company and not overwhelm them with all the work, because it's quite a lot.
Okay. Now, perfect. Jean-Georges, so we've heard Charlotte and Amy talk about the value proposition. And let's say, PayPal, the value proposition was crystal clear, and we started on our data mesh journey. Did you start with a 3-month strategy to figure out what you wanted to do? Did you experiment, test, and learn first? How did you? What was the very first step in terms of in your roadmap at PayPal?
So it's very interesting because we never said we would build a data mesh. So when I joined PayPal, we one of the need was really to be able to deliver a better compliance and regulatory for our regulatory environment. And so you can think about the better governance kind of way of doing things. But it was not the only thing. Okay, we had other priorities. And basically, when you're thinking about the four principles of data mesh, we had to work on three of them. The only one we didn't have to work on was self-service because we already had self-service. So we started our roadmap on saying that, okay, we need this new platform data something, okay, that we needed to build. And I remember we had a meeting with my boss and the rest of the team, and who said, I came and said, look, we have self-service, we're working on these three other things, these three other main feature. Don't you think it's really looking like what this lady Jamak put in place with this data mesh? And everybody kind of look at each other and say, gosh, yeah, it's very close. So basically, instead of saying, hey, I'm going to build a data mesh, it was more like, well, we've got this problem to solve, this value to bring to the company, and gosh, it's awfully looking like a data mesh. So at this point, we realign ourselves to the data mesh principles and we all started reading Jean-Marc's book like 24/7, right? Which was before this one. It was the only credible resource when it was coming to, and a few of your blog posts as well. But anyway, and in terms of how we manage a timeline, we had a budget of 1 year. Okay, so it was basically you've got 1 year to prove that it works, or this is the door almost. Okay, so we went through it. We had our first POC very quickly, and then based on what we had our POC, we added some features that were missing from the proof of concept, and also the integration in the PayPal environment. So I would say, if you think about that, about our timeline, our roadmap for like 2022, it was really about proving that the things we're doing is bringing value, and then integrating it into our environment. And now, well, we've got more things coming. Okay, so but we've got this infrastructure, and then we can add feature on it. And our roadmap is really about adding features in that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That journey actually sounds very similar to the one I've been through a few times, but ultimately, there's two ways to, I suppose, you can approach this. Maybe you're working with a big consulting company and there's an opportunity to do a 2 to 3 month strategy that lays all that out. That's one approach, and it's a perfectly viable. The one I've experienced is very similar to yours, which is you have a very short runway and you have to prove yourself. And what we ended up doing was we actually worked with some very senior executives who had a particular problem. They wanted to get a product into marketplace, and they had to do it very, very quickly. So we found that value proposition. And then we didn't come up with an enterprise data mesh journey. We said the very first step is we were going to plan to get our first data product or data quantum up and running so that we can show it delivers value. So that for me, I think there's a bunch of different ways that our audience could start their roadmap. There's nothing wrong with doing a traditional strategy approach, which is, try and get as much detail as you can to plan out your journey, or you test and learn and you bring perhaps agile practices, I suppose, to data mesh and build the stuff incrementally. But now let's sorry, go ahead, Jean.
If I may add, one thing that you don't want to do, or at least I wouldn't advise, is to have a roadmap or a journey where you're only focusing on one or two of the principles. Okay, I'm not saying you've got to be to have them at the same level of maturity. Okay, but you still have to have the four principles. Okay, I've heard so many times like, oh, federated computational governance, that's really difficult. Yes, it is. But if you don't do it, I think you're missing a lot of the points of data mesh. Okay, so that's something I just wanted to add to you here.
No, I think it's a very important point, but let's dwell into that a little bit more. So as we've talked about, there's this first segment, whether it's a 3-month strategy, traditional strategy, or a test and learn to get one thing up and running and demonstrate some value. Let's say we've done that. Like, what happens next? What happens? What does our roadmap show? We do after we've got our very first success. Amy, let's talk about how you have progressed your enterprise data mesh journey and how you've got past your very first data product, if you will. What happened in your roadmap next?
Oh, well, that's a tough question because being honest, it was a bumpy road based, in that we tried to implement something based on a use case that we thought it was the best. And it was good, but maybe it was not the best one to start with. Also, the people was not that on board, and the person who got assigned to manage the project and all that was, not that into data. So it was a little bit complicated to have these little things tweaked because as you said, this is a social technical thing. So you only cannot focus on the technical part, but you need to really change the mindset of the people working on these projects, right? And it was quite difficult to do all the onboarding and try to make sure that everything is documented correctly. The data platform, I cannot complain about that. It was moving smoothly. The engineers, the architect, everything was implemented super fast. But I think actually they should go a little bit, on the same speed, because if you move too fast on the technical side, then you are behind with all the products that you can create and all the people you need to onboard. And that's something that actually happened to us, that we moved too fast on the technical side, and then we were behind with all the other parts. As JGP said, like, you cannot have one without the other. It's kind of, as you said, it's okay, the maturity level, but cannot be that big of a distance, otherwise will be a little bit messy. We were able to deliver the first data product, and we started to implement a lot of other domains. But the thing is, we were trying to catch up still with the first one, and then try to catch up from the product perspective and the social technical part with the other ones, while all the implementation technically was done. And that was almost impossible. You feel like you never end, and the people is not fully on board. And I think we have to step back actually and take it a little bit slower to try to make things right in all of them. So is more sustainable in the long term, because we cannot start walking, before crawling. And at some point we tried that. And I think that was kind of a failure some way, somehow in our roadmap, because of course, some people would like to have this much faster than others. I always wanted to take it a little bit slow, but there is some other people pushing. So you just have to go and go and go. But definitely my advice in these kind of moments is just try not to go too fast, and just, go kind of on the same maturity level. You can implement things in parallel, as I said, the technical side, the data product side, all these data governance part. But, it's just a matter of know the pace and what is the right pace. And that's something that you learn basically falling and kicking your head out with something. And then you learn and you redo, and then it's going to be much better. So now we are in this stage that we are doing a little bit different, simplifying things for other people and trying just to get things right from all the perspectives.
Okay. So Amy, I'll ask you a quick, so if you look at the percentage of time or effort or money that you spent on the technical stuff versus the organizational stuff, what was it? 50-50, 75-25? Did you spend more time and effort on the organizational or the technical side?
I think on the technical side, actually, because, I'm the one running from the product perspective this project, and I I mean, it's basically me trying to convince the whole company and preaching, because at the end of the day, it's about preaching about data mesh and how it benefits you, and going to conferences and speaking like here or these kind of topics, and from the perspective of the cloud and everything we have done, it's a lot of money. You see like the invoices and the budget for all that, and it's huge. But I don't think we had invested a lot on the data governance part. However, now we're investing more on that with the data catalog, with some other stuff that will bring a little bit more value for the governance part. And that's what I said. Maybe you think the technical is like the most important, but not really. All the other mindset change and all the support you need to get from other, head of data or directors or this kind of high level people is super important to be successful. Otherwise, you just have a fancy platform and nothing really done completely. So that's what I see the trade-off of focusing on one thing or just the other. It needs to be kind of on the same.
Yeah, no, my experience is somewhat similar. I'm going to phrase it a little different, then I'm going to ask Charlotte her perspective. But money-wise, effort-wise, perhaps technical expenses were pretty high in my experience. But where we found we had to spend the most time and where we had the most pain, the pain side of it was almost all in the organizational side. So trying to win the hearts and minds, as they say, of the development community or the data community to change the way they operate, go from centralized to decentralized. So what I found is the technical side was very easy to quantify, but the organizational side was the hardest. So Charlotte, does that resonate to you? What's your experience been?
Yeah, definitely. I think the organization part is the most important one. Sorry, technical guys. Sorry for you. No, but I mean, finding the right architecture or the right tools for you. There's like tons of things on the market. I mean, that's my feeling, at least. You can find experts for any tool that you will need. But finding someone that will tell you what your organization should look like, how people should interact, well, basically it's up to you. It depends on the context, on the culture also of the company, of how people react, how they get motivated to do things. So I think it's the most important part, and that's where you should spend time. Also the different roles. I mean, even if you have, like we said, one data product that is working, so you have been able to find this first proof of value, and generally speaking, it's with people who were already mature. So this first data product team is usually working because you were able to pick the right people to do it. But then when you have to expand to the whole organization, it's another story, because usually people have different levels of maturity regarding data. So either you need to recruit some people, so it's going to take time, so you need to anticipate these, or you need to train existing people. So I think it's really, really important, like defining the upskilling plan for the organization and recruitment plan for the expansion of it.
So Jean-Georges, welcome your perspective. What we're hearing from Charlotte and Amy is don't underestimate the challenges on the organizational side, whether it's roles, identifying, training for people, loosely speaking, operating model, perhaps even new team structures. When you looked at your roadmap at PayPal, how did you factor in the organizational changes that were probably required?
I'd say it's what we're going through now. More, and it's probably a little bit more than what we anticipated, to be honest. It has an impact on the way of working, whether whatever you're doing with data, as well as your consumer or a producer of data, when you put a data mesh in place, it has an impact on your work. one of the things we're kind of facing a little bit is why change. Okay, so what I've been doing so far is working. Yeah, ish. Okay. So it's about all this democratization, I think, of the data itself. Okay, so you want to be able to deliver this self-service platform, but in a governed way, and so people have to start understanding that one does not go with the other. And I think this is an important thing that, yeah, I think everybody's underestimated it here. I'm an engineer at heart. So the thing is, yeah, I like a good engineering challenge. When it comes to people, I like to go to a bar with people. Okay. But anyway, so I think one of the things that is helping us from the beginning is that we had a persona-based development. Okay, so we're mentioning Agile and a lot of things there. When you're building a data mesh, it's really about bringing all this, I would say, the last 20 years of software engineering best practices to the data engineering world. And yes, it can be a shock for some data engineers. And one of the things we took from Agile is this persona-based development. Okay, so who's your audience? Who are you catering to? And this is, I think this is something that helped us tremendously for the communication. And I think Charlotte mentioned communication as well, for targeting our audience and who's going to use that and what part. And now as we're adding more feature to our platform, it's even more obvious. Okay, so we're doing things specifically for the data product owner, specifically for the data engineer, specifically for the data scientists, and targeting more people in the company as well, like BI users and developers.
Okay. Now, Amy, one of the things that I'm hearing kind of spread out through the discussion is this notion of test and learn. I think somebody once said before, it might have been Jean-Georges on another panel, that we're really bringing agile practices from the software industry into the data industry, if you will, which I thought was a very astute observation. So when you think about, Amy, your journey in the roadmap, how did you factor in the whole test and learn ability? How did you introduce, for lack of a better word, again, agile practices to the data engineering community at your firm?
Well, I think at the end of the day, data mesh is domain-driven development. So basically, it's quite similar to that has been doing the engineers for many years. Some of them were software engineers in the past, and they became, just data engineers. Some of them just grew as data engineers. That's the new generations, I will say. But the way the company was already working was pretty agile in the way the products were managed. So we have, in the domain team, they still have their own, ceremonies, and they work through sprints, and they try to improve the product that they have. They hear requirements. For example, these domain, the first one is stream-aligned. So basically, they have a lot of consumers, and they hear all these requirements for the consumers and try to improve the product based on that. So I think that hasn't been actually a challenge per se. It's been fluid because the company was used to work like this in general. Even with the old data team set up and the way they were working, it was also, working in the more agile environment. So I think that was not really a challenge for us. I think the most challenging part is having new product managers or project managers, data product managers that were not aware of how this data world, because they come from UX or from backend or some other parts of the product. And for them, it was very difficult to understand what really a data engineer does, or what does a BI developer does, and how they can give work to them or create value out of it. And that requires a lot of data literacy programs, and try to teach them how it works, the value of the data, even, things like basic SQL, for example, that you can actually query a data set and understand the product that you are sharing, like this curated data set or so, or for example, some basic visualization in Looker, in Tableau. I mean, you name it. These little things need to be, as Charlotte said before, they need to be scaled up, and these teams to be able to have a real agile, domain that works in synchrony. Because as I said, for the engineers were the difficult, but I think the PMs that were not in data were the ones that suffered the most, because they also had to fill out like this data product canvas. I even divided them in different types of templates. So it's like, okay, this is product, you just focus on this, and to make it a little bit easier, because they get overwhelmed a lot with all these, input ports, output ports, this and that, and they really don't get it because they have never worked really with the data teams. And I think that's the hardest part of the setups of the data mesh, where you have to mix and match people from backends and also from data and from other sides of the software world into this data topic. And yeah, again, data literacy, I think it's challenging, but it's one of the most important things that you can do to make the data mesh successful. Otherwise, the people will get really defensive and then might not want to adopt or cooperate enough if you don't have the buy-in of the C-levels. I mean, only if you have it and they kind of push you, they will do it. Otherwise, they will be like, this is too much. I don't want to do it.
Okay. So Charlotte, we've heard a lot about agile practices, test and learn, data literacy. And let's say we're successful at doing that. And we've got our, maybe not just our first data product, but maybe our third or fourth. So the next question that obviously comes in is as to our roadmap. We should plan for success. Okay. So let's say we are successful and we got our 3 or 4 data quantums or data products up and running in production. How do I scale? What do I need to think about? What do I need to put in my roadmap to allow my organization to scale? So in other words, let's put it in perspective. If it took me a little while to get 3 or 4 and it's really working, what I've seen in with my clients is there's a lot of people now knocking on the door saying, I want to do that. I want to do that. And you have to have a slightly different approach to scale and do push data products out, if you will, at a faster pace. What do you do? What do you need to think about in your roadmaps and your plans around scaling your data mesh organization and capability?
Yeah. So maybe on the scaling part, I found it interesting to have like because of course the whole point is to decentralize data and have autonomous teams, but I found it really useful actually to have a central team that is here the whole time of the transformation, because this central team is still going to be here to take this role of helping to scale, training people, and then they can also be the reference for the federated governance that we see at the pillar in the data mesh. So I think this central team is going to be here for a long time to help with the scaling. So it's going to be about recruitment, training, communicating, and then on the more technical side, of course, you need also to plan for capabilities because you're going to have to serve more and more domains. So you need also to have some guidelines and plan what you want these domains, what you want them to be able to do on their own, like on what are they free, independent, and on what do they have to follow some guidelines that you give them. So for me to scale is to really plan what's on their side, what's not, and then what need to be given to them regarding guidelines, training, scaling, and infrastructure as well.
Okay, perfect. So Jean-Georges, Charlotte talked a lot about the organizational with a mix of technical in there, but let me one approach that's worked for me is we've established, for lack of a better, we called it a factory, a data product factory. And what we did there is we tried to identify repeatable patterns sometimes technical, so DevSecOps type patterns, also patterns around what worked in terms of a data product owner's role and responsibility and team structure. So we tried to find organizational patterns as well as technical patterns. So Jean-Georges, you're, from what I gather, you've mentioned, you've had some success and you're scaling, or at least thinking about scaling your data product landscape. How are you approaching the technical side, the factory perhaps, and the organizational side? What is working, and perhaps what are kind of the landmines that we ought to think about as we plan our roadmap?
Well, this is where a lot of people have been opposing having data mesh and data fabric, and even the big analysts out there in the world to say, blah blah blah, data fabric, data mesh is dead. But I think that they work together, and it's a bit like what you just said, Eric. Is you need to go from the craft artisanal side of doing something to the industrial side. Okay, so very early on. First thing is, we knew we would not end up with 6 data products, okay, or 6 data quanta, okay, with a big company, and data matters a lot for us. So we know that more and more are coming, okay. So the problem of managing individual data quantum would be in the context of the data of the data mesh and a lot of data quanta in your data mesh. And I think this is where we're really valued, the Jean-Marc's insight when it comes to the control port. Okay, so you've got this control port to be able to talk inside your data quantum, and you also think about the data mesh experience plane in terms of architecture. Okay, so this is where your tooling is really important, and whether it's a homegrown data fabric or data product factory, or if you use some external vendor, this is where you're going to be able to scale the number of products. Okay, so that's about the scaling of the number of products. I think the scaling in the number of users is less of a problem, especially with modern architectures and the cloud. The other problem you can think is the scaling of the demand. Okay, as you were saying, Eric, you delivered. Hey, I also want my things in it. Okay, so outside of just adding more things, more data products to your mesh, there's also, how can I add my other capabilities in the mesh? Okay, because right now I have some need for my team. Okay, for example, I don't really care about streaming for my needs, but I'm working with other teams that say, hey, I really want this streaming port, okay, on your data product. So how do we scale as well this feature? But I would say that's a software engineering problem, right? Because you're building a new platform, but it's software engineering. It's not anymore data engineering. Okay, so I think that as your roadmap matures, you've got to think that it's a combination. It's really engineering, whether it's data or software engineering. You've got to have both roll together.
Okay, perfect.
Just to add something to this topic, for me from the product perspective, right? Because we have here the technical side of things as well. Something that works, it's basically to do a workshop where you have technical and product people, and then for each domain, you understand what are the data sources and what products, by creating use cases. Okay, based on these use cases, how many products we can create and how they will, get used by other products, or which data is going to be, together from other domains. And then you can prioritize which products needs to be built up first. And, first on each domain, what it worked is, for us, it was to create kind of a MVP for one, and then scaling up with the next ones in the priority for each domain. And then you understand what are the needs and which, and of course, priority changes, right? Depending on what the company is asking or what are the new OKRs or KPIs for the next quarter. But usually, at least if you have a decent structure where you have, all these thought process about sources, products, and what can be done based on a use case, you can understand a little bit more during the roadmap how to implement them and where the priority lies and how they can impact other teams. And that's how you play it, like a chess piece, basically, and moving it around and building and completing things or adding features extras to certain data product and maybe not build up a new one because it makes no sense. Maybe you just need a few more columns or a new calculation, but could be easily added to an existing one instead of just rebuilding another one with just one more two columns, for example.
Okay, perfect. Now, Amy, we have a question from the audience, but so I'm going to start with you. This is from Marco, and I'm gonna, because you started talking about KPIs, Marco's question is a good one here. So I'll ask it and then get perspective from the panel members here. Which KPIs can you recommend to quantify the progress and benefits of your data mesh implementation? Amy, we'll start with you, and then Charlotte, get her perspective.
Sure, I think it's important to measure the lead time, the deploy frequency. This is something that we are measuring, the mean time to restore, and the change fail percentage. Some of these things were measured in the past for some things, and you can compare, between the past and the product and show benefits out of it. Even you can have metrics as usage rate and what's the frequency of the people accessing this data product, because maybe it's faster and it's better, so people is more willing to access it and use it than before. So those are the things that we are actually trying to measure and make sure that are part of the products we are putting into product.
Perfect. Charlotte, what's your perspective on KPIs?
Yeah, I agree with Amy. Very focused on the data product and what's the value that is being delivered that needs to be measured, of course. But then also something interesting is to I think measure the number of new roles, new people that endorsed the roles that you defined. How many are they? Are they trained yet? Have they defined their own objectives with the top management? How is this working? You can measure this actually in terms of organization and make it visible. This is also a good point, I'd say. And then of course you can have also KPI of usage, documentation level, and is this useful? Are people using it when it comes to metadata, and I mean the whole governance that comes with it. This needs to be measured too, because there's no point in governing and in documenting everything. This needs to be prioritized and measure if this is useful. So yeah.
Absolutely. So I think Amy and Charlotte, Jean-Georges, they've highlighted definitely some very important metrics. My experience is definitely aligned with that, but also what I found very successful for me is, remember we talked about that value proposition that we started with. Every data product has a value proposition. What we found is we wanted the metrics that were most important were the metrics that proved to the business community, the business sponsor, the person paying the bills, actually got their value. So for us, it was time to market and actually being able to enter market. So Jean-Georges, for you at PayPal, as much as you can share, I suppose, how did you measure the success of your data products? What metrics did you consider examining?
I don't have much things to add over what Charlotte and Amy said, but I'd like to focus a little bit on and reverse the situation a second. When Marco was saying, how do you quantify and measure the benefits of your data mesh implementation? Okay, How did you guys measure the benefits of that?
You're asking Charlotte and Amy?
Well, I'm asking you, Eric, because you're grilling us since the beginning, so now I'm grilling you.
Well, like I said, for me, every single data product has its own value proposition. And while there's definitely some technical metrics, so how long does it take to actually get your data product built at a macro level? The business metrics that we found most useful, there are somewhere around boosting customer engagement. So being able to have the right data and be able to put that in front of the customer was crucial. So we actually measured the engagement that the change in engagement as a result of that. We also found that as a result of trying to get into market with these products, being able to determine, in this case, it happened to be a little bit of AI, a little bit of customer engagement, but were we able to make a difference by providing data, new data, and more effective and quicker data, I suppose, to the actual customer. So ultimately, this translated into getting products into market. Could we shrink that? And actually revenue at the end of the day. So it's really customer engagement, revenue, and really time to market were the crucial ones. Every single data product is a little bit different. Obviously, these are kind of broad categories, but every single data product needs to be built for a reason. And the person paying the bills, the business sponsor, knows exactly what they want to do. You want to anchor to those metrics. In addition to capturing the technical metrics, which support the business metrics, obviously, but never ignore the importance of the actual customer, the actual usage metrics from the business perspective. So
for me, I think that it's important also the ENPS, the NPS of the data product per se. So, run this kind of survey to understand what's, if the people is actually satisfied also with the process, as Charlotte says, like what could be improved in the processes we are running at the moment, how the data product could be improved, what are they expecting for a new iteration. That's valuable feedback that you can actually get to improve, in the next products or the next domains that you are rolling. And that's something that we are going to implement. It's not there yet, but it's going to be implemented soon because we would like to understand what are the real needs for each consumer and producer, and then bring it to the next level.
Okay, perfect. Now we got about 5 minutes left, so this may be the last question, and there might be one more question that we can ask. I'm going to start with Charlotte, because you mentioned it in the early stage of the discussion, and it's a pet peeve of mine actually. Also, is this whole notion around socialization of the work that we're doing with our data mesh. What I found is it's a great way to find sponsors. It's a great way to communicate. Find reasons to communicate with executives, and it drives it drives you to establish podcasts, lunch and learn type things, which really is all about driving, getting your message out and driving ultimately, hopefully, momentum for your data mesh. So tell me a little bit about how you've incorporated this whole notion of, I call it socialization, into the journeys that you go through with data mesh. How have you taken advantage of that aspect?
Yeah, so I found useful is that you can build some internal communities of people who have the same role. So basically, when you have several data products running, people are in different teams. I mean, in hierarchical point of view, they are related to different business entities. So they don't really talk to each other, but they live, they have the same pains, they go through the same journey. And yeah, usually they ask me and like, what's going on with the other teams? How are they going through this? Can we get some tips? Can we share best practices? So I found it very useful to just start some internal communities of like data product owner or, these kind of new roles in the company, so people can just get to know each other and then help each other. This is the first point, and this can take several forms. Of course, you can have something very basic like Teams channel, or like a space where people can share knowledge, but then you can also really animate it through some specific events or days. This is very appreciated in general. So yeah, that I'd say this is the main part of it, but you can think of other ways. Also, when we talked about, I talked about a central team that is in charge of the whole journey. Also, what's useful is to organize some Ask Me Anything kind of session where people can feel completely free to ask anything and show that yeah, just show that you are available to help them through the journey, and so that they don't feel alone in the dark. This is very important.
Perfect. Now Jean-Georges and then Amy, I actually like to formalize this activity. On all of my roadmaps, there's actually a task which with milestones and resources attached to it. I call it socialization. Like I said, other people can call it different things, but I actually like to formalize that aspect. So Jean-Georges, am I overthinking this?
No, you're not. We have we don't call it socialization, but we call it user adoption, and we've got a series of activities called around user adoption. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Amy,
the activities are very similar to what Charles was doing. You know, like
okay,
lunch runners and things like that. Yeah.
perfect. Amy, you get the last word before I close. Tell me what's that? How have you used socialization to build momentum for your data mesh journey?
Yeah, I actually had the pleasure to organize a data conference for all the people in my company. We're around 60 people in data, and also some other people from business joined. And we took advantage there, of course, besides having talks about several data topics and other kind of things, to touch the data mesh, to show the infrastructure, the architecture, and basically, you know, welcome to the dark side. We have cookies type of. So it's, you know, just doing that, and also speaking to the head of data of different business units, trying to push not the full data mesh with them, but, you know, pushing certain things like templates or ways of working, or come and use the data catalog, or these kind of things. And, you know, it's just a matter of do the preaching, but not being like a salesman either, you know, not too pushy, because otherwise people get scared. So I think it's just a balance in between showing a little bit of everything, but not pushing them to take it over, and just let them come when they see the benefits on the other domains and the other business units. And that's how you scale up.
Perfect. I'll tell you what, that actually brings our session to a close. So here's a few things just to quickly wrap up. You know, in terms of the things the audience needs to think about for your enterprise data mesh roadmap. Obviously, you need to take to heart Zemex's guidance, which is this is a socio-technical endeavor. There's technical aspects, there's organizational aspects. Do not underestimate, as you've seen the panel members mention, do not underestimate the organizational side. We've also heard that you know, you want to factor in this whole agile thinking, bringing agile practices to data engineering, if you will, or to data, allows you to structure your roadmap in a somewhat agile fashion, which is important. And we've also talked a little bit about the fact that now we have a few of these great data products out there, 3 or 4. We actually have to think about how we're going to scale, because if you're successful, you're going to have a lot of people knocking on your door. So your roadmap needs to take into account that. And last but not least, your roadmap should have this if not a task bar, definitely the notion of socialization and being able to find a vehicle to communicate your successes and drive the momentum to continue to grow and nurture your enterprise data mesh. So with that in mind, I would just like to say thank you to Amy, Jean-Georges, and Charlotte for their wonderful insights and participation on this. And with that in mind, I think we are done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Eric.
It was a pleasure.